welcome to Solosaurus, a podcast about one-player board and card games. My name is Brandon Waite.
And my name's Carter Mackey.
And this is episode 32, where we're going to be talking about a game that is absolutely better than all three of the Hobbit movies, Lord of the Rings, Journeys in Middle-earth.
I mean, that's a pretty low bar.
Well, yeah, it's a low bar, but it's better. It's
Right.
definitely better. See, we didn't spoil the review at all. But before that, we'll do like we always do and start with the news. Our first bit of news this week is that Paizo has announced Pathfinder, the adventure card game, the core set. And that was a little bit confusing for me because several years ago now, Paizo released the Pathfinder adventure card game and have since released like 4 big box sets for it. But as I understand it, this is like a second edition of the game. So they're taking a new approach where there's now a core box and that does still play 1 to 4 players just like the old one did. But maybe it has a little bit of updated design as far as the look and feel of the cards, some tweaked rules and all of that, but a new standalone adventure. This isn't a reworking of the first box or anything. So they're sort of rebooting it, but also apparently all the previous content is compatible with this version. So that's kind of neat.
Okay, I'll have to say I'm actually kind of ignorant about this game because I've never really been interested in Pathfinder. Is this just a cooperative? Is it competitive? I don't really know anything about.
Yeah, it's fully cooperative. You basically go to different locations and try to find a certain enemy in that location's deck and defeat him, or find an objective in that deck, and you roll dice just like you would in an RPG, but it feels worse because it's a card game.
Right.
And you don't have the flexibility of an RPG.
Right.
At least for me, it does.
Okay.
So a lot of people, though, really love this. I played it 1 or 2 times, and I was kind of realized it wasn't for me. But if you are one of those people who really likes this is pretty cool because it means you can keep all of your previous stuff. It's, not outdated or anything, but now there's just more stuff on the way. So if you're at all interested in that, check out Pathfinder, the adventure card game core set, 2nd edition, I guess you could call it. And it looks like that might be coming out at Gen Con of this year. Our second bit of news for this week is one that's, I guess, a little bit older, but maybe I missed it and somehow missed it for this show. And that is that Fantasy Flight Games has now released a game called Star Wars Outer Rim. This is for 1 to 4 players, and you're going to be taking on the role of some Outer Rim bounty hunter, like a Lando Calrissian or Han Solo or somebody like that. You'll be taking different dangerous jobs, tracking down bounties, upgrading your ship, and gaining more fame. And it caught my eye, I guess, because the board shape is pretty weird. It's like a crescent thin strip.
Right.
Almost.
Like a big C.
Yeah, it's a big C. I guess that's cool for a lot of people. To me, it looks pretty uninteresting. To me, it looks sort of like Merchants of Venus, but on a skinny little board.
Yeah. That's the first thing I thought whenever I saw the board.
Yeah, that's not immediately alluring to me. It might be a really good game, but it's probably not my style of game. Pick up and deliver, like point-to-point movement like that is not really my jam. So if you're at all interested in that, or you liked Firefly and you want to try that on the Star Wars IP, it looks like this might be pretty cool. Although I would suggest waiting. As I understand it, this sold out pretty much immediately at the distributor level, and I have seen people paying just absolutely god-awful amounts of money for this game. Do not pay $200 for Star Wars Outer Rim.
Right.
It's not worth it, folks. I haven't played it, and I know it's not worth it.
Right. It'll go into print very soon.
Very soon. Fantasy Flight isn't Z-Man Games. You won't have to wait 4 years for a reprint. It's coming. So, that is Star Wars Outer Rim. Our last bit of news for this week is that Black Sonata's designer, John Keane, has put up a thread on Board Game Geek announcing a new expansion for Black Sonata that he is testing right now called Probable Lies. And if you listen to our review for Black Sonata, you'll know that this is a game that we thought was incredibly cool. It got the stamp of approval from us. And this new expansion sounds pretty interesting. It's going to have basically 5 small modules that tweak little things in the game, maybe increase the difficulty of figuring out who the Dark Lady is, adding new Dark Lady possibilities, and as I understand it, adding a module too where you might be getting misinformation about where the Dark Lady is going next. So there could be some probable lies involved.
Right.
I'm not sure exactly how that would work, but if you want to know for yourself, the files are available on Board Game Geek for you to start testing it out and giving some playtest feedback to John Keane. So,
great.
Yeah, go check that out. We'll link to that thread in the show notes. But if you're just itching for more Black Sonata, that's a good place to check it out before this expansion goes on Kickstarter whenever it's ready. So that is Black Sonata Probable Lies. That's all we've got for the news this week, so we're just going to jump right into the review for Lord of the Rings Journeys in Middle-earth, which is one of our most requested reviews. I know a lot of you all want to hear more about this. This is from designers Nathan I. Hayek? I don't know. And Grace Holdinghouse. This comes to us from Fantasy Flight Games, published in 2019, and it is for 1 to 5 players. Journeys in Middle-earth is a campaign-based, app-supported board game where you're going to take on the role of various heroes from Middle-earth, some well-known, others not so much, at least not to me. And you're going to start exploring the vast and dynamic landscape of Middle-earth, using your skills to survive the challenges that you encounter on your quests. And as you and your fellow heroes explore the wilderness and battle the dark forces that are all arrayed against you, the game's companion app guides you to reveal whatever forests and clearings and ancient halls of Middle-earth lie in wait. And it also does a good job of controlling the enemies that you encounter. So whether you are venturing into the wild on your own or you have some friends that are going to go through this with you, you can start exploring the world of Middle-earth in this game. And I have to say, that theme already starts to come to life as soon as you start looking at the tiles for this game, where you're going to see the wilds and the halls and everything you're going to be exploring. As soon as you start putting them out on the table, it starts forming a world that I sort of just want to go charging through looking for adventure.
Yeah, instead of like in Mansions of Madness, which is the obvious comparison with this game, where you have all like squares or rectangles, this you have different shapes, you don't know how they're going to fit together, and so it has very much a sense of you're exploring the world, you don't know how it's going to turn out. I don't know. It's cool. I like it.
Yeah, I think so too. The art is really well done on all the tiles. It's sort of bright and inviting, at least on the exterior tiles.
Yes.
I think the forests and the ruins and all that look pretty cool. On the backside of some of these tiles are some caves that look a little less interesting, a little more muddy, maybe. Kind of Mars-like.
Yeah, very dark.
Yeah. And that's not bad. It's not alluring in the same way as the exterior ones are for me anyway. But the art is well done on all of them. There's some visual interest in terms of just the variety of settings that are available in the base box. I was surprised by that. I like all of that really well. There's some miniatures included in the game for the enemies and the heroes, and the miniatures are quite good. Some of the better ones I've seen from Fantasy Flight. And I think it's because the art style is just a little bit more distinct, maybe, or a little more...
Yeah, I could see that. That makes sense.
Yeah. They look really neat. I think they would look fantastic painted. We're going to find out soon. I just want to paint those bad boys up right now with my terrible, mediocre beginner's painting skills.
Right. Whatever. They'll have color on them eventually.
Yeah, eventually. But even if you don't, they look great on the table. And then beyond that, you've got kind of the typical Fantasy Flight fare at this point. So you've got a bunch of cards that have a pretty decent linen finish and a lot of Hobbit cards.
Yes, there are lots of the standard Fantasy Flight small little cards with the linen finish.
I don't love that size of card and probably never will.
It doesn't bother me as much as it bothers you. But, it's whatever. Yeah,
it's fine. It's not bad at all. In fact, I would say overall the component quality here is quite good. What you would come to expect from a Fantasy Flight game. But I don't think I'm going to ever stop mentioning that I don't love that size card, especially when they're the primary cards that you deal with during the course of a game. I like bigger cards.
Yeah. Oh, I could see the skill cards being a little bit bigger would be nice because you're having to reshuffle them and go through them a lot. But the other ones being small, doesn't bother me at all.
Yeah, I could see that. See that. But overall, I think that the component quality for this is great. One thing that stood out to me in this game versus Mansions of Madness, which is, just so you know, something we're going to compare this to throughout because it's very similar in how it's set up and organized and run by the app and all that. One major improvement over Mansions for me is the numbering of the tiles.
Oh, gosh. That's such a better idea. I don't understand why it wasn't like this in Mansions of Madness.
Oh man, me either. If you've never played Mansions of Madness, what we're talking about here is that when you start exploring throughout a mansion or out in the town or whatever, the game tells you to find the office tile or the library tile.
Or Alley 2.
Yeah, or Alley 2 or Hallway End 3, which looks very much like a hallway. And there are a ton of these tiles, and I only have the base game. and 1 expansion, and I've just got a huge fat stack of these things. There's no way to keep them in order. The tiles are double-sided, so you might have an office on one side and a bathroom on the other side. So it just takes forever to find even one tile. Here, the tiles are all numbered, and they have an A side and a B side. So the app will tell you, find tile 103B, and you just go right over to your pile where you've got them in number order, and you can grab one and put it down, and it's amazing to me that such a simple thing makes such a big difference in the play of the game.
Yeah, it really just, it saves a lot of time, I feel like. Or at least time I don't want to spend doing something like that.
Yeah, it saves what feels like a lot of time.
Right.
Yeah, because I never just want to search through a pile of tiles. But yeah, that's a small thing, but to me, that's a big step forward in how the game is organized. So overall, the component quality for this game is very good. And I would say that same level of quality extends to the rulebook system as well. This is almost exactly the same style rulebook that is used in pretty much every Fantasy Flight game at this point.
Right. A how to play book and then a reference rules book.
And you know what? It works.
Yep.
For me, it works perfectly. The base rules for this game are very simple.
Mm-hmm.
They're very easy to understand with lots of clear examples and pictures and everything. And what I really like about this is it tells you exactly what you need to do to set up the first scenario. And then it says, once you've finished your first scenario, read these 2 more pages in the next rulebook. And then basically you're good to go from there.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have any questions, you can just look it up in the very easy to use rules reference. It's a brilliant system.
Yeah.
And because the solo play for this game is just control 2 characters, there's not a whole section of solo rules or anything like that.
Right.
So it does make learning the rules and setting up much, much easier than in other games. So I really do like all of that. The components, the rules are fantastic. And that brings us then to how the game actually plays. And we will talk a little bit about how this game differs from Mansions of Madness, but I think maybe it might be best just to start by talking about the game on its own merits and what it brings to the table that's interesting. So what you're going to do is you're going to control 2 or more characters when you're playing this solo, and you have the option of playing like Bilbo or Aragorn or, some of the characters that you know from the books or the movies.
Gimli, Legolas, things like that.
Yeah, pretty standard Lord of the Rings-y stuff. But then there are also some characters in here that either they made up or I'm just not familiar with or don't remember. And I thought that was interesting to include a mix of those kind of characters in here. Like there's a bard type character that I don't remember ever seeing anywhere.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's been too long.
Yeah, it's been too long. So maybe somebody out there is listening to this going, I can't believe they didn't know or whatever. I'm sorry. I'm not a Silmarillion guy. I'm a Hobbit guy. Not the movies.
Right.
Never the movies. The books. Anyway, I didn't know them, but I felt like there's a good cast of characters in here to choose from. There's quite a few options, and not only are you picking a character that has their own special abilities and stats and everything, you're also pairing that character with sort of a job or a role within the team. And they have roles that make sense for those characters, like the preferred one, but you don't have to stick to that.
Right. You can mix it up however you want.
Yeah, I think that's really neat.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, you're just following on-screen instructions for getting the correct starting items and gear and all that stuff. It just streamlines that whole process. And what's even cooler to me is this is a campaign-based game, and in between sessions, if you were tired of playing, Bilbo as a pickpocket or whatever, you can change him over to a bard or something. He can have a midlife crisis and career change if you want him to. He'll start driving a Miata with the top down, making bad life choices.
Right.
If you want to do that, you can, but your progression throughout the campaign is tied to your job, just like in real life. And so if you decide to make one of those career changes, you're basically sort of starting from scratch in terms of your character's abilities.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it is pretty cool that you have the option. There's some flexibility in that system that I really like.
Yeah, that it is a nice option to have.
But what's most important about these characters on their sheets, beyond their special ability, are their stat numbers. And in that respect, it's not so different from something like Mansions of Madness or Eldritch Horror. A lot of this game revolves around going and exploring things on the map, and then completing tests to see how successful you are interacting with them. And what you're going to do is this game will tell you, okay, you interact with this set of footprints you see on the ground. check them out and see what you can find out about these footprints, and test your spirit number. And when that happens, you look at your spirit number, which might be 3, we'll say. You pull the top 3 cards off of your character's deck and look at them. And up in the upper left-hand corner, you'll see either a success symbol, an inspiration symbol, or nothing. And if it's nothing, it means that card doesn't contribute any successes toward you doing this thing. Success symbols obviously do. And then the inspiration symbols mean if you've got a little inspiration token, you can spend it to turn that into a success. It's very similar to X-Wing and Mansions of Madness and probably any number of games to come from this company. And it's not a bad system.
No, it's not.
It's actually pretty nice because you can gather inspiration from doing different sort of heroic or interesting things, or just by blind luck and stumbling onto a little bit of inspiration. And there's a good decision there in, do I spend this or do I hang on to it for another time?
Right. And there's obviously tests where it won't be like, oh, you need 2 successes. You don't know how many successes you need. And so you don't know if it's worth it to burn your extra inspiration to really make sure you clear a test.
Yeah, I like that variety. Yeah, sometimes it'll say test your agility and 2 is a success. Other times it just says input your number of successes. Right. And that always makes me so paranoid.
I know.
One thing that I will say about that, though, and I can't say this for sure, it's just a sense that I have from having played the game. It seems like if you interact with something and you fail that test, which is going to happen with some regularity, it looks like when you go back to revisit that spot, whatever progress you made on discerning what that was about the first time seems to be applied at some level to your second attempt.
Right. I feel like normally, like, whenever you won't get a complete success, it still indicates, in the description that somehow this contributes towards you accomplishing this test.
Which is great, because in a lot of games, what that would mean is you failed, you'll just do the same thing over again next turn.
Right.
And that feels awful.
Yeah, very bad.
This is nice, because even if you're just not getting that lucky, you do have at least a little bit of progression that's happening, even though you can't really measure it.
Right.
So I really like that. And that's going to happen as you move around the map and the app tells you to put down these search tokens or tells you about different areas of interest around the map. You will test all kinds of these stats to, stave off fear from being in a dark place, or to try to find hidden tracks, or to try to check out this like little patch of mushrooms that you found, which is one of the things I stumbled on. And that just is a way of helping you to explore the world and keep things interesting. But it's also used for combat. And that's where the system is a little less rewarding.
Yeah. I guess with combat all of these types of games where you have this kind of randomness, it's not deterministic. So you might not be able to do a lot of damage to an enemy. But if you don't kill it, it's going to do damage back to you. And then on its turn, it's going to do more damage to you, which is a lot, I feel like, in these types of games, or this game, because I would say, like Mansions of Madness, you have damage that you can take and, like, essentially fear. I forget what they call it in this game. Do you remember?
Fear.
Is it just fear?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, you can only take so much of that, and then you have one last chance not to succumb to either of those things, which you probably will. I don't know.
Yeah, for me, I always failed my last stands, is what they're called. Yeah.
Yeah. So things can be bad, can be very bad.
Yeah, they can be very bad. And sometimes, this game follows a very simple pattern where the heroes go and then evil goes, basically. The evil forces go. And on any given evil turn, something bad could happen, like another enemy unit could sort of pop up on the map if you're playing one of the adventure scenarios. And then that thing will start moving toward you. And these enemies move toward you at an incredibly rapid pace.
Right.
They will cover the map to get to you very quickly. And so that can feel kind of oppressive and like you're constantly battling things. And then on top of that, for every scenario that you play in this game, there's sort of a tracker at the top of the screen for the overall scenario and how much time you have left. And as this little bar fills up, you can see little landmark moments in the story. And when you cross one of those landmark thresholds, some new really bad thing happens.
Right. It's always going to be bad, I would say.
Almost always. I mean, I assume I'll just say always, yeah, because nothing ever good has happened to me.
Right. Right. Well, it is, I think it's what, the threat meter or something like that?
Oh, yeah. So the threat is growing the longer you take.
Right.
And I do like that meter because in Mansions of Madness, for instance, the more time passed, the closer you were to losing the game, but you never knew how close you were. So it's nice to see that represented in a visual way.
Right.
But it does create this sense of dread because you think, ugh, I've got one more turn, and if I can't do something meaningful, then this is going to spawn some new terrible enemy that I'm going to have to deal with the next couple of rounds or whatever. And there's a sense of dread that pervades this game that is very similar to Mansions of Madness because the combat is so difficult.
Combat is very difficult, and that really, I would say that's the thing that caught me off guard most with this game is how much it felt like a Lovecraft game. Not even just Mansions of Madness, but like Eldritch Horror or something like that, where it is not mechanically the same, but just you feel so weak and against kind of insurmountable odds, which is not what I think of with Lord of the Rings. I feel like there's like, obviously the tides of evil are on the move, but there's still something to hope in, and you just kind of assume you're going to be able to win, and the universe is in a cold, heartless place that is just going to slowly extinguish all life, but you're just staving off the darkness for a little bit. I don't know. It's a weird vibe for the game in my mind.
Yeah, I think so as well. I mean, I like the combat in many ways. It does feel tough and rewarding when you win, and that's good. And there's a lot of variability in how you can handle any given attack. So, for instance, you know, if I'm Aragorn, the captain, if I flip 2 successes in testing my might skill to fight something, I look at my sword item and it says 2 successes is 5 hits on this creature. And Aragorn is just good at running in and cutting things up, just like he is in Lord of the Rings. You know, he's great at that. With Bilbo, things are a little bit different because for him, he gets this condition very often where he can be hidden. And then he can sort of leap out and surprise enemies and do extra damage by doing that and piercing through their armor. And so just having played those 2 characters through my campaign, it feels very different in how they handle combat encounters, which I think is nice. But defeating even the smaller enemies takes a lot.
Yes.
It takes a lot of time. It's going to drain your health and put fear in you. And because you know that's going to happen when you go into one of the encounters, you're never feeling like you're doing some big heroic thing. You know, there's never the moment when the Hans Zimmer score breaks in and you have that Aragorn and Legolas and Gimli team up moment.
Right, where you're just slaughtering dozens of orcs.
No, none of that stuff happens. It's like, if I kill this one orc, I am lucky to have survived that encounter.
Yeah.
And that's not bad. It's just, it's unexpected.
Right.
It would have been totally expected if I was playing Mansions of Madness, because I go into that knowing that my investigators are fragile.
Right, that they're fragile, that, I don't know, it's just that whole Lovecraft feel of like, the cold universe of just, you're just staving off the darkness temporarily at best. And that's like accomplishing your mission. Where, I don't know, I wanted more of that, like, that feeling of heroic adventure. It doesn't have to be easy. I don't want it to be easy. I still would like it to be challenging, but yeah, I don't know. It was just like, my expectations were definitely wrong with what the game is.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to say it. And now that said, the way that this game handles combat and tests, I do find to be more interesting than Mansions of Madness, for instance. So in Mansions, you do a test and you roll a bunch of dice and see how many successes you get, and you can spin clues to turn some clue symbols into successes. You can feel very quickly in that game like you are just completely hosed by the luck. I mean, there have been games where I didn't roll any successes, it felt like, for turn after turn, and you just die.
Right.
No matter how many good decisions you try to make. And when I learned that this game was going to use a deck to sort of figure out successes just by flipping cards, I found that to be interesting because what this game does with the deck is not only are you flipping cards to see if you have successes or not, but at the beginning of your turn, you have the ability to scout the cards in your deck. So if your character lets you scout 2 cards, for instance, you pull the top 2 cards off, look at them, and then you can prepare one of them, which means you set it face up under your board, and that means you can use that card for the text on the card, which will give you some nice little boon. Or you can put it down on the top of your deck, like for instance, if it's a success, you might want to put it on the top of your deck so you know next time I test something, I have at least one good success card. Or you can put it on the bottom of your deck. And so, for instance, if you have a card that you don't really want to prepare, but it doesn't give you a success, or, it has an inspiration symbol, but you don't have any inspiration, or if it's a weakness card, which is just a card that clutters up your deck here, you can just get rid of those. And that control is really cool.
Yeah, it's a really nice little, pre-turn decision you're making.
Yeah, and at the beginning of any given chapter, you get to start by preparing sort of extra cards, scouting extra cards and preparing one, which is nice.
Yes.
And if you're playing a character like Aragorn, he gets to scout even more cards. So his thing is a little bit of extra control over the deck that he also grants to his allies.
Mm-hmm.
And so it does majorly change how you play or what you might or might not decide to do, I think. And I like that. And I like the way, too, that from mission to mission, you have the ability to gain experience that lets you slowly craft your deck. That's a cool idea because it was done in Gloomhaven. That's how Gloomhaven handles combat and growth for your character. I thought it would be very cool here. And it is cool in a lot of ways. That decision of whether or not to prepare a card is great because the best cards to prepare are the ones that also have successes on them.
Yes.
So they're really tempting, but there aren't that many successes in your deck to start with.
Right.
And you need them. That's a really cool idea. The problem is, I found myself very often thinking to myself, oh, that's a cool card. I want to prepare it, but I only have 4 successes in this whole deck.
Right.
I really need to just put it on top.
And there's a significant chance that it'll never even come up as an option to prepare, or it might just not really be useful for the situation you want it, that it would be best for.
Yeah, I found that to be just kind of a fascinating concept, but also one that it felt good about half the time.
Yeah.
And the other half, I just felt kind of powerless and at the whims of my deck. So I do think that in many ways it's an improvement over the dice system in Mansions of Madness. But I would say I went into this expecting more control than it ends up giving you.
Right. I would say the same. I was looking forward to it. It sounded really cool. I definitely liked it more than the idea of just using dice. It is better than just using dice. But the progression is pretty slow. There's not a ton of control. You're reshuffling your deck every single turn. So there's not even a sense of okay, I burned these bad cards. This is what I have left. Or I don't know. You're starting with a fresh deck every single time. That makes it a little bit more unpredictable. Even if I guess that predictability would be bad because you use all of your successes. I don't know. It seemed it could be polished a little bit more. It's not bad, but it seems like it's a decent system that could be better.
It could be the case that the system does get better over time. Fantasy Flight has introduced content in their expansions that has focused some of their mechanics a little bit more.
Uh-huh.
So specifically the focus mechanic from Eldritch Horror, for instance.
Yeah, that should have been in there from the beginning.
From the beginning of the game, it should have been in there. It just gives you more flexibility and control.
Mm-hmm.
I could see something like that coming into this game that I think would really help it. It would also really help for me if you had one inspiration token at the beginning of the game, because I very frequently found myself without any inspiration because I was trying to spend it to hit somebody or to, stave off just one damage, because you have so few health in this game. Anytime you can prevent damage, it's a good thing. But whenever you are without inspiration, it feels really bad.
Right.
Because you're just totally at the whims of your deck at that point. At the beginning of any given chapter, it could take you a while to get one inspiration.
Yeah. With playing Bilbo, it's pretty easy to get inspiration, but there would be long stretches where, for instance, Aragorn, I could not get inspiration.
Yeah. And if you were playing, for instance, on an adventure map scenario, which is sort of the macro view of the adventure, I guess. It's like the overworld. Those are a little bit easier to get inspiration in because anytime you explore a new tile, you automatically get one, which I think is very cool because, those tiles stay sort of grayed out on the map until you explore them. And so there's that incentive to go in there and see what you see. But also you get a point of inspiration. That's great. When you are playing the scenarios that have the battle map, which is basically something I've not seen before in a game, where you just take 2 big tiles and set them out on the table. And it's sort of like one zoomed in battle or scene that you play out. There's nothing to explore there. at least in terms of new areas.
Right.
And so for those, like let's say, for instance, one of those was a bigger battle, there's no way for me to get inspiration right off the bat. I'm fighting lots of things, and I have no way to earn inspiration except by killing the things.
Right.
It just felt like I never had any, and I really, really needed some to make these battles feel like I had some control over them. It's a mixed bag for me. I really like a lot of the ideas that are here.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the idea of using the deck in that way is clever, but I just want like an ounce more control.
Yeah.
And the other thing is too, and Carter mentioned this just in passing, over the course of any given adventure, you're going to earn lore points, which is basically like anytime you see something cool or do something cool, you get a little bit of lore. Anytime you hit a major story beat or something. And then also you're going to earn experience for completing things. And so the more lore your party earns, and it's shared among your party, the more access you have to better cards, basically. So you can upgrade your item cards, or you can, add new skills to your deck. And then it costs experience points to actually put those skills there. I like that. I like the flexibility of being able to take skills that you've already gotten and basically like sell them to get them out of your deck and get those points back. Mm-hmm. That's great. The problem is, after 4 chapters playing through the campaign, I still was not adding cards to my deck that felt like they were making me feel stronger.
Right.
It just felt like things were really slow to add to my deck to change it up.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that, I realize that you're playing a campaign. You're going to progressively be getting more powerful versus like a scenario in something like Mansions or whatever, where it's like, okay, yeah, you can ramp up the characters pretty quickly because then it's over and just it ends however it ends. But this, yeah, you're taking this stuff from one chapter to the next. But yeah, it still felt really, really slow. I just assumed I'd get at least one little, like, I don't know, like a new weapon or item or something just to give me one more tool in the, toolbox.
Yeah, because there were several chapters I finished and I could add another card to my deck. Like I had the experience points to afford it. But then the more I thought about it, the more I thought, is this actually helpful? Because I can get this new card that would be really cool if I could prepare it. Mm-hmm. But the chances that it's going to come up at a time when I can prepare it are pretty slim. And if I'm not preparing it, it means that there's just a blank card sitting in my deck.
Right.
So there's one more card that I could pull that doesn't have a success on it. And that's part of the game in a sense, right? It's like choosing whether or not you want to clutter your deck with things that would be cool to prepare is an interesting part of the deck building experience.
Right.
But I just wish there were more cards earlier on that made me feel stronger. Instead of just, here's sort of a lateral move that you can spend your experience on.
Yeah.
That's not to say this is a bad system. I feel like it sounds like we're just saying bad things about this. For me, I really, really like this game, and we'll get more into our thoughts on it later, but it is a complicated beast for me. It's sort of a mixed bag. As somebody who loves Mansions of Madness, all of this sounded like it would be a step in the right direction, and for me, it's like, it's apples and oranges, maybe. So, all that to say, you might sort of want to temper what you expect out of the experience. Don't expect more control, and don't expect more heroism. And at this point, it might be helpful just to focus a little bit more on the differences between Mansions and Lord of the Rings. One thing I like about this quite a bit more is that, yes, this is a campaign, which makes it harder for other people to jump into, but the campaign is broken up with a lot of variety that I thought it was really cool. Like, not only are you alternating between an adventure map and this zoomed in battle map, but some scenarios are just like exploration based, and you're trying to find, for instance, a lair or something like that. Others in the battle map are a big battle. Or you might get a fetch quest in the adventure map, and then the next scenario might be go around this room and talk to everybody here and try to solve some mystery.
Right.
To me, that showcases the best of what an app integrated experience has to offer.
Absolutely. It was really cool to see the variety. I wasn't expecting quite this much whenever I played it, but it's really nice. And like you said, I think it leverages the best parts of using something like an app that can handle that repurposing of like the same type of tokens and parts, and having that extra text that would be, a whole separate deck if you were just using a traditional board game.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. And so things never get stale. I mean, I don't know about you, but if I had to do those missions where, I went to go find something and then monsters chased me, while I tried to find it. If I did that for, 14 quests in a row, I would just be bored out of my skull. This breaks things up in a way that just keeps things feeling fresh to me as I keep playing. So I like that quite a bit, although just being able to jump into a scenario like you can in Mansions is pretty cool.
Yes.
Too,
Mm-hmm.
that it's definitely a trade-off there.
Yeah.
But for me, both offer kind of unique experiences in that regard. The other thing that I would say here is that Mansions, one of my complaints about Mansions of Madness is that you buy this $80, $90 game and you get like 4 scenarios that you can play with it that aren't that replayable. I mean, you can replay them. Right. And some things will change, but all the major story beats are still there. And even a lot of the smaller ones are still right where you left them.
Right. And just kind of uncovering the mystery is already been done.
Yeah, which is sort of the main point of the game. Here, I made sort of a dumb mistake when I was playing through my first campaign. My daughter came into the room. I wasn't paying attention. And basically, I pressed the wrong button, and it caused me to automatically lose a chapter. And so I got frustrated and just started over because there's no undo button, which there should be an undo button, right, folks. Mm-hmm. There absolutely should be. I mean, I should have paid better attention, but it's an app. I mean, in a campaign, progression-based sort of experience, making a mistake can be a very big deal if there's not a way to rewind it. So because I did that, though, I just ended that campaign and then rushed through pressing all the buttons on the screen for the first chapter just to get back to chapter 2 where I was. And in the process, I realized, oh man, the map build out for this version of chapter 1 is very different than the first time I played. Like there were new search tokens out on the board that I hadn't seen, new tiles. The whole map layout was totally different than the first time. And I don't know, I found that to be pretty cool because that means that there is more replayability here, I think. But not only that, there are a lot more quests in here than there are in the Mansions of Madness core box. And I don't know exactly how many there are because I haven't finished the campaign yet. But I get a sense that there are quite a few more. And it seems like the storyline can branch somewhat based on whether you lose or win a scenario.
Have you read anywhere about it branching, or is it just kind of modify the next mission?
I don't know because I don't want to read ahead because I don't want to spoil it.
Yeah.
But I mean, the consequences of losing one of these chapters seems like it's pretty significant. Or it could be. It could be that they just changed the flavor text or something. So I don't know how much it branches exactly, but it seems like the major story does branch somehow. And even if it doesn't, just based on my running through that first chapter again, it seems like your little experiences in the app can vary quite a bit. And so to me, there's just a much better price to content ratio here than there was in Mansions. I really like Mansions a lot, but I like the idea that I could replay this and have a significantly different experience instead of a slightly different experience.
I really wonder what it would be like to replay through it.
I don't know, but I'm anxious to at this point. I just to experience some of the other player powers, if nothing else.
Right.
Because those do feel pretty significant in how you play the game.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I don't know. I just would like to check that out some more. So I think that you are getting quite a bit just in the core box. And of course, this is Fantasy Flight, so they've already announced 2 expansions. But even if you didn't get those, there's a lot here to explore, for sure. And the battle map thing feels very innovative. The variety feels good. I guess all that to say, for me, this is a game that can stand alongside of Mansions of Madness. It doesn't have to replace it or just be compared directly to it in terms of do I keep one or do I keep the other? At least for me, it does not.
I think there are definitely things about this that I like better than Mansions. And just the decks, just the way the app works or handles things, it just feels a little bit different in ways that I like in leveraging what the app can offer. But for me, my own expectations of this were, I think, just off of what this game is. And this game felt too much like Mansions in a bad way because whenever I'm playing like Mansions of Madness, I want that kind of feel. I want the things being kind of dire or like really, really hard and difficult, like your resources of your like life or health or sanity, however you want to say it. That works really well in that setting for me. And so in this, it's too similar in ways, but not in that, oh, well, this is just like Mansions. And so there's no point in having both, but it's almost just the feel of the game isn't what I want for a Lord of the Rings theme, and that's where it's too similar in a bad way. It's just like a mismatch of my like genre expectations and kind of how the gameplay reinforces that or doesn't for me. I don't know. What are your feelings on that aspect of it?
So I agree with that, and I wouldn't have been able to put it into words that way until we talked. But I do agree. It does feel oppressive in a way that, I mean, yes, Lord of the Rings as a story is about, this overwhelming evil force that's coming to take over the world. And it does feel hopeless because, there are plenty of people, the realms of men and elves and dwarves out there who could stop it, but they're disconnected from one another. And so the hopelessness comes in that those peoples haven't joined together to sort of stop the darkness. That's the general thrust of the story, or like the major plot movement, I guess. But there are always characters in the story that are filled with hope and believe that it's possible for the main characters to sort of overcome this darkness. It's never totally bleak. And in fact, it carries that sort of hopeful tone throughout the books and throughout the movies or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I do think the oppressiveness is a bit much. The fact that it feels so similar to a Lovecraft story is just not that in keeping with the IP, I think.
Yeah.
But that said, for me, mechanically, there are enough differences. And in terms of like how the missions are structured with the adventure map and the battle map, the deck component, the structure of the campaign versus scenarios, all of that for me is different enough that even though I'd prefer that the tone be changed, I still love this game. I mean, Mansions of Madness is my favorite solo game. Or at least it was when I put out my last top 10. Who knows when I put out this year's, right?
Right.
But I do really, really love it. And so for me, I was sort of wondering, would this replace it or what? On any given day, I might prefer to play a campaign-based game with the deck that has a Lord of the Rings theme, or I might prefer to play Mansions of Madness. And so the tone could have been improved, but it's not a deal breaker for me. I guess that's where I'm at. There's enough differences here that it feels like a different experience.
Yeah. I think there are enough differences for it to be a different game from Mansions, but I still think it is... that similar theme is too distracting for me, personally, to like not... I guess to fully engage in how I was expecting to or wanting to. I don't know. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. I think if they applied this sort of system to more IPs, because that's what this company seems to do now, they focus a lot on the IPs that they have control of. And I mean, you could give them a hard time for that, but honestly, I'm sure they paid just a ridiculous amount for the license.
Oh, I'm sure.
Right, so you got to get your use out of that. I understand. And these are licenses that a lot of people love. I would love to see this system applied to more licenses personally. If they came out with a Game of Thrones game, for instance, that used this system, I would be over the moon. Or a Star Wars game. I don't really care for Imperial Assault that much, or I'm not really that interested in Game of Thrones, the board game. For me, the Game of Thrones board game, number one, is never going to be playable solo. And I don't like negotiation or dudes on a map that much.
Mm-hmm.
This would bring out sort of the more political intrigue. Because it's a more storytelling and mystery-solving kind of focused experience, it could bring out aspects of that story that are not made available in current games. Same thing with Star Wars. Like Imperial Assault or Outer Rim or whatever, they have storytelling elements to them, of course, but they're all combat-focused or mission-focused in terms of running one set of supplies somewhere else or whatever. I like that this is able to do a lot because of that app integration. And I would love to see, as long as they kept creating a variation on this same theme from IP to IP, I would love to see them carry this on somewhere else. But that said, I would be disappointed if they kept the oppressive theme throughout all the IPs.
Yeah.
Like Game of Thrones would sort of make sense.
Yeah.
Because goodness, there's some dread.
Yes.
There's some dread there.
Right.
No matter who you are. But like for Star Wars, for instance, if that felt just as oppressive, it would feel out of place in the same way that it does here.
Right.
But maybe even more so.
Yeah, I think so.
So I would love to see them continue this trend. I was very excited to see them apply that system somewhere else because the app integration here is just, for me, top notch.
Mm-hmm.
Streamlines so much of what the AI has to manage and all that. I really, really love that. It brings out the theme and allows you to, interrogate people and solve a mystery without adding 2 decks of cards to do it, but they would need to change some stuff.
Playing this game makes me not look forward to other games based on this system if it's in other IPs or universes, unless there was some, I think, more indication that mechanically it kind of changes the tone a little bit more and doesn't have that kind of oppressive feeling. Which, I mean, to be fair, is of a lot of kind of campaign co-op type games, or just co-op games in general, there's normally like a lot of external pressure. So I don't know really how you manage that, if that's just that would change too many core parts of it, but that's what I personally would like to see.
Yeah, I could see that, absolutely. I think that probably brings us to the end point of our review here, where we're going to just summarize quickly the good, the bad, and the ugly for this game like we always do. And for me, at least, the good for this game, I mean, there's so much of it here. The app and the way it manages things, even though you do spend a lot of time on the screen, and I know a lot of people don't like that, including Carter, that is a little too much for you at times.
Yeah, it gets a little clunky, and it's a little too much of looking on the screen and not the board, but
yeah.
I thought it was better in this than it was in Mansions.
Yeah, I think so too. I think the app continues to get better, and that integration continues to improve. That's fantastic. Using it even to manage character progression, so I don't have to keep track of my experience points or lore. And that's such a great innovation for these kind of campaign games that I would love to see more games use, for sure. The deck mechanic, it has its shortcomings and it's flawed for sure. It's an interesting way to manage tests.
Yeah, I definitely like it better than dice, personally.
Oh yeah, for sure. I like it better than the dice. I mean, it takes more to manage than the dice because you're using cards, and so you can't just throw a handful of dice and be done with it.
Right.
But for me, that trade-off is still good.
Right. It's more interesting choices, more to think about.
Yeah, the decision to prepare a card or not is great. I wish that it could be tweaked some, but I really like it. I wish that the progression happened quicker, but those still don't damper that for me. It's a really good core system. I love the variety of play here. Not only between the macro adventure map and the battle map, but even just in the style of play from mission to mission, that feels really good. And I do feel immersed in the experience while I'm playing it. And that's one thing that I'm looking for. Mm-hmm. I want a game to suck me in. Oh, and one other thing I would add here is replayability and the amount of content that you get in the box. It does just seem higher to me than Mansions.
Yeah, definitely. I think just straight out the box, I would say more content with the breadth of the campaign and everything.
Yeah. So there's, a lot of good here, and even more than we could say, but those are definitely the high notes for me. As far as the bad for this game, there are a few things that I would put on this list. It is not a perfect experience.
Yeah. Luck can still just really go poorly for you, and that always just feels helpless. Because, you can have bad luck long enough to where it swings it to where you're going to lose that chapter.
Yeah, we don't want to give away any spoilers here, but I will say, for instance, there was one chapter where I was fighting a battle and I felt like I had it in the bag. I was going to beat the big bad, and then all of a sudden I did not. And it didn't feel like anything that I could have planned for. It just felt like the app decided you're meant to lose this mission.
Yeah, not a great feeling.
No, it's not a great feeling. So you definitely can get hosed by not only what the app throws at you, but of course just your card draws. I've had several turns where I just felt like I could not draw success to save my life. Sometimes literally to save my life. And so that never feels good. But it never feels quite as bad as it does in Mansions, where you throw the dice and they just never seem to go your way.
Yeah. That is always worse in Mansions as far as luck.
Yeah. And that could be true in any number of games, right? Like, we've been testing out a Call of Cthulhu RPG game, and in our last one, I just was ready to set my dice on fire. Every roll was absolutely trash.
Yeah, you did. I think you had one success, and it was on like a really insignificant thing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Of course it would be on the one insignificant thing.
Mm-hmm.
But in an RPG, failure it leads to really interesting story developments, or it can.
Right. If you don't have a mean DM.
Yeah, if you don't have a mean DM like Carter. In a board game, though, when you fail, you just fail. It doesn't lead to interesting story beats or whatever. It just feels bad. So the luck feels worse here when it's bad than it does other places. And for me, the progression is lacking. I want to feel like I'm growing earlier than it seems like you can in this game.
Yeah, I agree.
That one of my favorite things about Gloomhaven is managing that deck and crafting it, but that happens at a rapid pace, you know, and some of that is that you're going to cycle through characters in the course of your campaign. But even so, like, I just wanted to see a little bit more here, even though it's a cool concept. The story in this game is good, but it is a little bit sterile.
It's a little bland.
It's a little bland, yeah. And to be fair, and I know I'm like treading on some thin ice here, The Lord of the Rings as a story in the modern context is still interesting and still a beautiful story, but it's not as dynamic and maybe interesting moment to moment as a lot of modern fantasy is. It's much better written than like 90% of modern fantasy.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. But maybe it was more acceptable in an earlier age to describe a mountain range for, 60 pages. Maybe. I don't know. But it does seem to have... it's just a little bit more sterile than, for instance, one scenario of Mansions of Madness feels crazy.
Yes.
I mean, that story that's encapsulated within that one scenario can get really wild really fast in a way that each individual chapter does not really in this game. I think overall I like where it's headed, and I feel like it's going to build to something really big, even though I'm not all the way to the end yet. I do feel like I've had enough experience here to get a sense of what the game is like.
Yes.
And it's heading somewhere good, but I feel like they could have cranked up the story just a notch. Also, it's just hard to pick up for just one game. If you want to play a game of Lord of the Rings, you can finish a chapter and save it, but it doesn't have that same just pick up and play quality as Mansions, for instance, because, if I play a mission and a campaign, I need to sort of refamiliarize myself with where I've been already and what the larger context of the story is before I can get sucked back into it again. Whereas Mansions is, here, let's play this one scenario, and I can invite a friend into it very easily.
Right, yeah.
If I want to, where I can't really with this.
Right.
So I was on chapter 3 and I had a friend who wanted to play, and that was great. I want to show him, but that means I've got to go back and replay the first chapter and sort of start a new game, or else I just have to catch him up on everything.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
And that doesn't feel great. I mean, if you're a person who plays sometimes solo and sometimes multiplayer, that's a thing to consider, I would say.
Yeah. No, that's a good consideration.
But that, for me, that's the bad. And
yeah, I think that's probably covers all the bad for me. And I don't think I have any ugly for the game.
No, I wouldn't say I do either. In fact, I'm just going to come right out and say, I love this game. I mean, I love Mansions. I knew I would probably like this, and I really do. And for me, this is still a stomp-worthy game. It's one that I plan to revisit quite a bit. I'm very anxious to finish my campaign and really love my time with it. If it doesn't sound like that all the way through this review, I think maybe it's important to remember it's possible to love a thing and also recognize where it's flawed.
Yes.
And this definitely has some flaws and some room for growth. But even so, I really absolutely love it.
Yeah, this is a game that I don't love. I wouldn't give it the stomp, but it's a game I like. I enjoy it, but it's just, for me, there's a mismatch internally that just keeps me from loving it. And I think even though there's things about this game I like better than Mansions of Madness, for instance, I think just Mansions of Madness, like the way the system works with that theme and what I expect out of the theme, it ultimately makes me like that more.
Yeah. Like this one needed to be tweaked to fit the theme just a little bit more.
For me personally.
Yeah, I could see that. So a lot of people have said they've heard mixed reviews of this game and wanted just a little bit more clarity before they purchase. Hopefully this provides that, I guess, and helps you decide if you want it. But this is this is the definition of a mixed review. I really love it. Carter likes it. But, it's not going to get the stomp from us. Overall, I do think that Mansions is still just a little bit ahead of Lord of the Rings for me, just because of, just like what you said, the theme seems to fit it, and the feel fits the theme a little bit better.
Yeah.
But still, it's a really solid experience. And as a solo experience, too.
Yeah.
It's great. I mean, there's a little bit more shuffling and stuff than I would like.
Yeah, you're shuffling a lot.
Yeah, and you've got to control 2 characters.
Right.
but it's not that bad. And as somebody who doesn't like to do that, I still found it to be very satisfying solo, and certainly easier to complete a campaign.
Yes.
So that's all we've got for you for this episode then. If you like this show and you want to find other great shows out there about board games, go and visit thedicetower.com, because this show is a member of the Dice Tower Network, which is a great network of shows that are all about board games and done by people who absolutely love them and come at them from very different angles. If you want to find your second favorite podcast behind this one, go and visit dicetower.com and check out other shows in the network. If you haven't followed us on Facebook or Instagram yet, you should. We get new games in, or we play games, we post pictures, we ask your opinion about different things. If you're following us on there, you can see all of that stuff and see when we do giveaways for different games, which we do from time to time. So follow us on Facebook and Instagram. Write us a review on iTunes. That helps to get the word out about the show. We've had several people writing reviews recently, so thank you to all of you all who have done that, and please keep it up. It really helps us to get the word out. And finally, if you have not yet gotten one of our micro badges that we have on Board Game Geek, you can send me a message and I will send you the Geek Gold to get one for free so you can show everybody how much you love the show. We've had a lot of people take us up on that, and I love seeing those Solosaurus badges out there. So if you want one, just send me a message and I'll be happy to spot you the Geek Gold so that you can get one. And that's all we've got for you for this episode. Until next time, I'm Brandon Waite.
And I'm Carter Mackey.
And this is Solosaurus.